E te ti, e te tā. Tina koutou kua mene mai, ne I ngā tōpito o te whenua. Piki mai ki te wharewananga o Waitaha, I raro I te korawai, a tawhai o nai tuahuriri. No mai, hari mai, tauti mai. Kia ora and good evening. My name is Misty Sato, and I have the pleasure of serving the College of Education, Health and Human Development as the head of the School of Teacher Education. I also have the honor of serving as a member of the advisory group for the Graham Nuttall annual lecture. In these capacities, I was invited to be your Master of Ceremonies for the evening. Our first order of business is to keep everyone comfortable and safe. So you may have already found the whare paku following our reception. And in case we have an emergency and evacuation is necessary, please listen and follow the UCSA staff's directions. In the event of a fire alarm, evacuate the building calmly and quickly. Meet at the emergency assembly point in the middle of the Island car park. In the event of an earthquake, remain where you are and adopt the drop, cover, and hold position until shaking stops. Once shaking has stopped, calmly and quickly evacuate the building and assemble in the same location, the middle of the Island car park. We are honored to have with us tonight Chancellor Sue McCormick. Sue McCormick was appointed to the University of Canterbury Council in 2009 and was elected as Chancellor starting the 1st of January 2019, having been a Pro-Chancellor since 2015. As Chancellor, Sue chairs the University Council. She is a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, Finance, Planning and Resources Committee, Executive Committee, and the chair of the Vice Chancellor Employment Committee. She was recently retired as partner at Mortlock McCormick Law, where she specialized in corporate and commercial law. Following the earthquakes, Sue had a leading strategic role in the CBD development, The Terrace. She is a chartered member of the Institute of Directors and is currently a director of Kiwi Rail. Sue has previously been a director of the Littleton Port Company Limited, the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and the Public Trust. Please welcome Chancellor Sue McCormick.
Rauranga tera mā, no mai, piki mai, hari mai. Ki te wharewananga o Waitaha. No era. Tēnā koutou, ki ora, tātou katoa. It is my great pleasure as Chancellor to welcome all of you to the University of Canterbury this evening for the annual Graham Nuttall Lecture. I'm so pleased to be welcoming you in this wonderful Ngaia Theatre and the stunning, newly opened Hareroa, the UCSA's new home. I will leave others to speak about Professor Nuttall and to provide the background to this lecture series, but I do want to acknowledge Graham's family, in particular his wife Jill, daughter Robin, who I very much enjoy working with here at the university, and son Peter, and to acknowledge the former students and colleagues of the Professor in the audience here tonight. A special welcome to you. Professor Graham Nuttall was one of UC's most esteemed academics, and along with the College of Education, Health and Human Development, UC is proud to be able to host this annual event, which continues to inform the National Education Dialogue. It is fitting that tonight's lecture comes at a time when the focus for UC is on the development of its new academic strategy as we return to an undistracted focus on learning, teaching and research after years of disruption and rebuilding. Professor Nuttall would have been proud to see that. Building on the university's strong global reputation after nearly 150 years of engagement, we are ready to strengthen our commitment and engagement with our local, regional and global communities to become even more connected and purposeful and supporting a peaceful, thriving world by sharing world-leading research. It is an exciting time in the university's history, and as Chancellor, I look forward to leading the UC Council in supporting our students, staff and alumni in consolidating our place as a globally recognised, comprehensive, research-intensive university. The lecture tonight, therefore, fits well with the new strategy, and I hope you enjoy listening to the Graham Nuttall Lecture for 2019. Thank you.
I'd like to provide just a little history of the Nuttall Lecture Series. This series was inaugurated in 2004 as part of the Graham Nuttall Classroom Research Trust, with Professor Nuttall delivering the first lecture as Professor Emeritus. In that lecture, Professor Nuttall provocatively described the taken-for-granted place called a classroom. I quote from his lecture from 2004, "One of the most important things about school classrooms is that they are both very familiar and at the same time very mysterious." Professor Nuttall had a long and esteemed career at the University of Canterbury. He's credited with the longest series of studies of teaching and learning in the classroom that has ever been carried out. He was a renowned scholar, known in both Aotearoa, New Zealand, and internationally for his innovative and insightful classroom-focused research. I first encountered his work when I was a graduate student at Stanford University and was mesmerized to read about the work I knew so well as a teacher through the eyes of such a careful analyst. His opus, The Hidden Lives of Learners, continues to influence educational research around the world today. I talked to one of my colleagues, Michelle Clark, in the School of Teacher Education because she was one of Graham's students and colleagues for many years. And I want to just give a little quote. She wrote long post-it notes to me about all of her wonderful experiences with Professor Nuttall, and this is just a little snippet of that. "People were always at the heart of his teaching and highly visible through his use of anecdote and recordings in classes, as well as his research. He always asked how and why." If Michelle were here, she would go on for hours. Tonight, Professor Nuttall's reach will continue to be felt by all in attendance. This lecture series carries a tradition of seeking out both national and international scholars who examine the lives of teachers and learners in classrooms and centers. We will give the floor to another renowned Canterbury scholar and continue to learn about the enigma and possibilities of teaching and learning in schools. The College of Education, Health, and Human Development is proud to carry on the legacy of Professor Nuttall through its stewardship of this lecture series. This stewardship includes a dedicated advisory board chaired by the college pro-vice chancellor and composed of academic staff, colleagues from the education sectors, and the Nuttall family. I'd like to recognize this group and their contributions to making tonight possible. Pro-Vice Chancellor Letitia Fickle, Jill Nuttall, Richard Edmondson, Karen Davis, Marg Trotter, and Annalise Camp, who couldn't be with us tonight. But thank you very much for your service to continue this lecture series life. It is now my honor to introduce Te Huranui Clark, who will in turn introduce our honored speaker this evening. Te Huranui is a senior lecturer in the School of Teacher Education, and importantly, is a colleague, co-author, student, and friend to our invited lecturer. Please welcome Te Huranui Clark.
E rere whakaterunga nei, a te whakaaro ki a rātou mā kua wehe ki te pō. Kua wehe ki te huinga kahurangi ki runga rā. A rā ko tahu pōtiki tēnā, a kōrua ko Peter Paraone, koutou ko netana ihaka, takoto tiraha, takoto oki oki, haere atu rā. E koroma kei te tangi, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou, moe mai, moe mai, moe mai rā. Rātou ki a rātou, e te hunga ora a tēnā tātou katoa. A kei ngā maunga whakahi, ngā awa tapu, ngā waka rangatira kei rungi a tātou a tēnā koutou. Anau mai, haere mai, tauti mai ki te whare wānanga o Waitaha. Nā reira e tau, e tau, e tau. Ladies and gentlemen, before introducing our guest speaker for the evening, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and congratulate on your behalf his wife. Associate Professor Sonia McFarlane. Sonia herself, a renowned researcher and academic, was recently inducted as a Fellow of the New Zealand Psychological Society. Nō reira, e hoa mā, hapaki mā. Kia ora, thank you. It is both an honour and a privilege to introduce our korokoro tūi, our manu ti ori ori, our kākā wahanui, our guest speaker for this evening, Professor Angus Hikairo McFarlane. I was given a copy of his academic biography, but decided to, and I hope you are amenable, reposition the emphasis and conduct some research of my own instead. Some of these phrases are phrases that Angus likes to use all the time. So therefore I used the research skills which I had gained under his tutelage and went straight to a ubiquitous source of information called Google. Google referred me to an extremely reliable website called Wikipedia. And Wikipedia told me, and I quote, Angus Hikairo McFarlane is a New Zealand school teacher and educational psychologist. He has mixed Scottish and Māori ancestry and was born in Rotorua into a family of 14 siblings. His family identify with Ko Te Aroa e Warupu Manawa, the 8 beating hearts of the Te Aroa tribe from the Bay of Plenty in the central North Island region. However, not being satisfied with a secondary source, I decided to speak to a primary source to obtain information which is quintessentially Angus. Someone who could give me the cut and the thrust of the man. I contacted his brother Ken. Ken revealed that Wikipedia was indeed correct and that Angus was number 9 of 14 siblings, which included one whāngai. Angus and his younger sister were the clever ones, the intelligent ones, and always showed academic promise. Angus and his younger siblings attended Rotokawa Primary School in Rotorua, and he then went on to Hatopaora College in Auckland. However, according to Ken, Angus took some time to settle in to the hurly-burly that was Hatopetera. Once he integrated into the school, he excelled in his studies. Angus was always a confident public speaker and had a unique ability to read the audience and pitch the speech perfectly in both English and Te Reo Māori. His sister Anne said, even from a young boy, the family has always admired Angus's wisdom, his love of learning, his respect for others' opinions, and his celebration of others' achievements. His overt pride in his Te Aroa whakapapa has been reciprocated with the high respect in which he is held by the kaumātua and people of Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Rangiwewehi, and Ngāti Pikiao. One anecdote she'd like me to share with you. There is one story associated with his love of tennis, and more specifically, his excessive devotion to Maria Sharapova when she made the big time in the female tennis world. Angus tried to convince Sonia and the rest of us that he loved watching her play because of her athleticism and unique ability as a tennis player. Our response, yeah, right. Good try, Angus. His response, well, she should win anyway because she's the best looking. So our brother is human after all. Wish him all the best from us. Keane states that one of Angus's greatest attributes is that he will always give something a go. That quality is still evident in the following quote, which was published in the Rotorua Daily Post on the 31st of December 2013. Professor Angus Hikairo McFarlane certainly knows all about perseverance and reward. The Ngāti Whakaue and Ngāti Rangiwewehi descendant is a professor of Māori research at the University of Canterbury, who has been awarded the 2013 University of Canterbury Research Medal in recognition of his outstanding contribution to Māori research and education. He is the first Māori to be awarded the medal. This adds to the Te Tohu Pai Tawhiti Award, national acclaim given to a top Māori researcher, which he received from the New Zealand Association for Research and Education in 2010. Professor McFarlane is director of Te Rūrangahau Māori Education Research Lab, focuses his research on the organisation of teaching and learning in schools, where structures and engagement emphasise Māori preferred ways of teaching and learning. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker for tonight. Ngongo taha me te heia maunga, te rotorua nui a kahumata mua moe me te mimi o peke haua. E Ngāti Rangiwewehi, Ngāti Whakaue iwi, Professor Angus Hikairo McFarlane. O kaki, ko haupea te weri tanga o te o ake. Te iwi a hau mai ta whiti, nana I whakaru ai te rongo, I Hawaii ki e ta hotora, au e ko te taua, au e nuku e pari mai ana. Ki te whakakohu ai te pounamu, a oho mai rangi e, katu ohu mai ra. Ki raro ki toku pātu wata, e tuake na, o e kore koa. E tai a te hupeke ki runga I te whenua, a katahuri atu, katahuri mai, te wehi o te rā. I takai a I te anu, ka mau tamataku e, katakina ki runga, katakina ki raro. Kia wewe nuku, kia wewe rangi, kia homa I te tohu nui e. Ka whakatau atu ake au, ko te whakariki, ko te whakariki. Oho tuku a mai ki a piri, tuku a mai ki a tata, kia eke mai ki runga ki te pai poto, aho mai tawhiti. Ka eke te hui, ka eke te wawa ki runga te parapara tuai e.
Whakarongo ake ai au ki te tangi a te manu nei. A te mā tui a. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro. Tui ai waho, tui ai roto. Tui ai te here tangata. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Tui ai te moka tangata. I takea mai I Hawaii nui. Hawaii roa, Hawaii pāmamao. Te hono ki wairua ki te whae ao. Ki te ao mārama tihei Maori ora. Tuatahi e tautoko ana ngā mihi kua mihia. Arā, ngā mihi ki a rātou kua ngaro ki te pō. Ka nui hoki te mihi atu ki te hunga ora, e ngā waka, e ngā reo, e ngā mana, e ngā kārangatanga maha, ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou. Ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou i roto i ngā tini pūtanga kētanga, i roto i ngā tini pā heke tana o tēnei te ao hurihuri. Ka tahi te miharo, ka tahi te aroha, mō koutou tainga tinana mai i tēnei ahi ki raro i te maru o tēnei wāhi mātauranga. Nā reira ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou. Tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along tonight. And also, thank you for the marvellous introduction. I didn't know that Te Huranui was going to be so elaborate and enthusiastic in his pursuit of data. But he did well, and my brother Ken, who's also my best friend, lives in Auckland, also known to be quite economical with the truth. So thank you, Te Huranui. You're a great friend and colleague and whanaunga. And thank you, everyone, for coming along. Tonight's talk, Restlessness, Resoluteness and Reason. What I want to do today is look at these bullet points here. And I'm going to have to go relatively rapidly, so bear with me, everyone. I want to take a brief glimpse at historical perspectives and at recent thinkers' contentions of this thing that we call culturally responsive pedagogies. Consider that what their research platforms were, and look at the notion of teacher effectiveness, but I want to add to those, because we have to add in order to bring culture into the mix. Contend that culturally responsive teachers and teaching plays a leading role in the transformation that transfers knowledge into real acts of knowing. In other words, it's research practice or practice research, so that we transform it, and this is what educators prefer. We have to have the theory, we have to collect the data, but we want to know what can we use out there. And today, this evening, I want to touch on some of those. By providing examples of accessible and existing and culturally responsive programs and frameworks and strategies. Teachers out there are hungry for it. Principals out there want more. Give us some rauemi, some resources that we can use so that better outcomes will occur for Māori learners and indeed for all learners. And I just want to conclude with a cluster of educational imaginaries. Some acknowledgements have already been made, and I would like to endorse those acknowledgements to the Nuttall family. Thank you very much, Jill, for your continuation to take Graham's thinking and theoretical foundations forward for practitioners in the field long after he left his legacy to us, for which we are most grateful. I honour previous Nuttall lecturers and also to UC, Te Whare Wānanga o Waitaha. Many of you are here tonight. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Thank you, SMT. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, scholars. Te rū rangahau, te rāngai ako rather, me te hauora, the College of Education, Health and Human Development. You have been kind to me and to many people, and moreover kind and generous for Māori students who are coming through, Māori learners. Te rū rangahau is the Māori Research Lab, as we've heard. I want to acknowledge mana whenua, nā reira, ngai tu ahuriri mana nui, ngai tu ahuriri rongo nui, nei rā te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa. Mā tā waka, all the tribes represented here, and to Te Arawa Waka, who have come here today, my sister, Trevor Maxwell as well, and my daughter has come all the way from Whangarei, and I have Sonia here, always by my side, and I am grateful for that. I was a bit worried, Te Hurinui, when you mentioned that she had got that award. I thought, well, she's got the show now. She deserves the show because it was a great honour to be at her side when she was awarded that at the New Zealand Psychological Society conference last week, and then went on to deliver a marvellous keynote address at the PB4L conference in Auckland. Also, I want to acknowledge the people that I have worked alongside in over 40 years of education. Connecting to and extending on Graham's work, I was at the NZARE, New Zealand Association of Research and Education conference, which was here in Christchurch in actual fact, in 2001. And I listened to his talk. He started to instill in me more of an interest in classroom-based research. He and some of his disciples talked about children constructing their own micro-world, individually and socially. They also mentioned the fact that prior knowledge differs remarkably from one learner to another. Not rocket science, not new, but we have to take it into account because it's such a truism. And it made me think of Finney and Rotherham's contentions that there are ethnically linked ways of thinking, feeling and acting that are acquired through socialisation. So we have to look through other lenses. So tamariki construct their own micro-world individually and socially, and their prior knowledge of Māori learners is often influenced by their ethnicity and the way that they think and the way that they feel and how they act. And it's in teachers' best interest that they understand that that is important. So making connections to other presenters here, Adrian Elton Lee, Guy Claxton, Alberto Rodriguez, John Hattie, and they talked about thin learning power and attention to authority. When it's thin, it's too much attention to authority, reliance on authority. It's more compact and congested and recapitulation, so they're doing the same thing over and over again. So it's not enough. So they refer to rich learning power, and that is where young people are taught to be persevering and taught about flexibility and imagination, empathy and all of those things that we value so highly. But I added to that, okay, because this is some of the pushback that we have to introduce to the research community. And don't forget about culturally imbued learning power. And those come in the form of the core values of Māori: whanaungatanga relationships, manaakitanga ethic of care, kotahitanga building unity, rangatiratanga having authority, and pūmanawatanga just having a talent to get the pulse and the morale right in the classroom. Graham himself, Adrian, Guy, John, Alberto, and other Nuttall presenters lead us to ask big questions. What do we really want for our tamariki? How can we best prepare them for an uncertain world? Because the world has changed in a very, very short time. It's changed big time. And therefore our needs and our wants for tamariki and in their preparation for an uncertain world also need our utmost attention. So both questions, Guy Claxton would contend, are intellectually relevant and morally urgent. Jury would add to that and say that they are intellectually relevant, morally urgent, but they're also contextually bound. So jury's adding to that. And the bound is not constraining, but it talks about obligatory. So we are obliged to take into account context. But first, a glimpse at the past. So that's the introduction. Te ao tawhito, the ancient world, having to cope with social and economic change. This is the experience of Māori throughout this land. And has it marred their educational achievements? Very, very briefly, loss of land, alien systems of national administration, war and disease, urban drift, right down, all of these had a huge pressure on their ethnic identity. While all those things were going on, lo and behold, we had a culturally deprived education system. And we're making good progress, in actual fact, but it certainly put the brakes on things. And they were unhappy experiences for many Māori going to school in those times. So various governments and entities have introduced strategies and programs and acts of Parliament to try to work things through. Right from the Native Schools Act to English being the preferred mode of teaching and learning, corporal punishment, the Hun Report, the Johnson Report, Māori boarding schools, Te Kohanga Reo, right through all of those things there. Te Whāriki, more recent, wonderful program for the early childhood curriculum, Eke Panuku, Te Kauhua and Kahiketia, being one of the latest. So I wrote about these in the paper there, Restlessness, Resoluteness and Reason. And all of these things came about because, I think, of the restlessness. And also because of the main dangers of Eurocentric hegemony, which is the lack of attention, rather, to alternatives to mainstream knowledge. And this went on for years. Brought to our attention way back in 1984 in an article by Howard and Awisu Bempa about the racism of psychology. And they mentioned, and I'm just going to touch on that number one because I want to go at a fairly good pace, the lack of attention to alternatives to mainstream knowledge, which is not only Eurocentric but typically focused on middle-class beliefs and practices, has the potential to leave the sector impoverished. Never a truer word was spoken. Never a truer series of sentences were spoken. But unfortunately, it is deficit-framed. And I'm not in that school, in actual fact. For me, it's glass half full. And which is why I introduced the Braided Rivers Hauā Whiria a few years ago. But I would turn that, it's true what Howard and Awisu Bempa are claiming there, but we need to turn it around and say, if we were to pay attention to alternatives to mainstream knowledge, which is not only Eurocentric but typically focused on middle-class beliefs and practices, then we have the potential for the education sector to be enriched. So, criticality, the restlessness with how things were a lack of attention to culture. So people like Paulo Freire pushed back. Others joined the movement, if you like. People like Gloria Ladson-Billings, Angela Valenzuela, Lisa Delpit, Ray Barnard, Tom Kavanagh and others. But in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have education leaders too, who model resoluteness in education. And there are a few names there that you would recognise, like Rose Pere, Iri Tana Tāwhiwhirangi, Tamati and Tilly Reedy, the list goes on. And at the bottom bullet point, we're saying that it is their faith in culturally grounded rationality in a quest for better ways and their courage to confront conventionalists that has made an impact. Their critical thinking emphasises the development of rationality and skills of evaluation of arguments. They said, slow down, we can work this through. Let's do it in a sensible way. Because there was a lot of pushback, but some reasoning had to come into the mix. And then these lines of reasons are what many of us in this room today have been following. But some of the more recent thinkers, and I'm just going to go through the red font, deficit theorising about Māori learners. Māori learners are lazy, Māori learners never finish their work, their parents don't help them, and so on and so forth. That went on for years. Then pathologising classroom practices, denial of cultural difference, right through. Now, that seemed to be continuing the narrative of deficit thinking. So a group of us got together and thought that don't most teachers want the best for Māori learners and their whānau and all learners? Aren't more teachers out there, if not most teachers, aren't they champions? So we carried out some studies. You can see Fickle et al. And Savage and her studies, looking for champion teachers upon which we could draw data and make some programs that would make a difference to classroom teachers. So here's just a few photos. Sometimes you find it hard to identify Māori learners. They're at the school, these are all schools that I've worked with. A nice little shot of those in the music room. A nice little shot of a Māori boarding school. They're all Māori. Do they need cultural responsive pedagogies? Yeah, it's needed everywhere, no matter which way you turn. And then there's in South Auckland. So getting some data stories. In South Auckland, the study was led by Alison Davis a few years ago, not too long ago, probably 8 years ago, when they asked teachers if they knew what ako, what does ako mean to them as an educator. And the data revealed that most of them knew very little about it. And only a small percentage, 11, were clear about it. What about understanding what can make a difference to raising achievement for Māori students? Pretty low on understanding that. Average, and not many were in the high category. What about cultural ways of thinking, acting and believing in the following groups? Again, not many had claimed to have high knowledge. So they were very honest. And then, are you aware of the latest research in realising Māori potential to inform teaching practice? So, they had a few options to choose from, like Kahiketia, the National Māori Strategy, the Pacifica Plan, Best Evidence Synthesis, Diversity, and many others. And I only need to go to Kahiketia, and you can see that 2% of them use the resource to inform their teaching practice. And only 20% were becoming familiar, but over half of them said that they were unfamiliar with it. So that's not good enough, even though it's a terrific strategy, it's a terrific document, there's so much in there. So something was going wrong and more needed to be done. More questions and answers. And just to the red font, how can we provide initial teacher education and programs that teaches professional development in such a way that it galvanises their empathy, skill and confidence in their work with tamariki and whānau? Because, for years now we've been getting the question, what is it about Māori? Usually followed up by, what is it about Māori boys? So some questions lead to anxiety about, but there's more to do. So many adjustments, so little time. We're going to run out of energy. There's the group and there's the self, and then there's the notion of fit. I haven't got time to talk about Joyce and Shao's work, but sometimes we hear the claim, I'm a maths teacher, I'm a good maths teacher too. Now I've got to deal with this cultural stuff, this cultural responsiveness. And we can understand that the busyness of teaching and of teachers is a real thing that we have to take into account. But we also have to realise that unless we do something to show them how, then we're not responding to the challenge or the weddle. You like my pūkana man? Yeah. So the weddle is how. A lot of those programs gave us the what. The whakapapa of culturally responsive pedagogy. Very briefly, there are a number of strength-based pedagogies. Culturally relevant, culturally responsive, culturally sustaining, reality pedagogy, and culturally revitalising. Goodness gracious, you get giddy. So we've chosen people like Sonia and myself, Gail Gillen, to continue to adopt and adapt one of those. and that is cultural responsive. We may change our mind a little later on because it's a changing zone. Look what culturally responsive pedagogy is about, and I refer to the work of Geneva Gay, 2002. Developing a cultural diversity knowledge base, designing relevant curricula, cultural caring. So we take all of those things into account. Communication, cultural communication. What is that? It's about, how these Māori learners were socialised. They are ethnically linked ways of thinking, feeling and acting that are acquired on account of their socialisation. And cultural congruity in classroom instruction. And that's the relevance thing. Relevance, balance of power and scaffolding is what we are continuing to emphasise, and not repositioning that emphasis to Huranui, but continuing that emphasis along the way. Now, unfortunately, in the red font at the bottom, there is no prescription for doing culturally responsive pedagogy. But in the second bullet point below that, we're saying that culturally responsive pedagogy is a Māori and non-Māori, so therefore a treaty responsibility. While there's no prescription, there are many possible ways of addressing an approach. So, referring to the work of Russell Bishop, Jan Hill and Kate Hawke, and some of our own work, going right back to 2004, 7 and 17, having that ethic of care, caring for the person. I like having you in this classroom, tamaho, but that's not enough. Tamaho, when you're in this place, we want you to work hard. We want you to learn, because Māori students prefer to know the boundaries and to prefer a no-nonsense approach, and to be pushed in terms of their work and their output. And there's another list there of linking the culture of home and school. So Jen Smith and I went to the Ministry of Education today to work with, to talk with, we didn't have time to workshop them, but we talked to Kāhui Ako, the communities of learners, about some of these things. And it was, very, very useful, because what they were after was that bottom line there, procuring a repertoire of strategies. Will you give me something to take away? But from the research, and I'm going to get on to 3 studies soon, it says that understand that culturally responsive pedagogies include insisting on high academic and behaviour standards and scaffolding the students to achieve these, tapping into their students' knowledge and their culture, considering the nuances of the dominant discourse. So if the dominant discourse is kāhikitia or te whāriki, never ever lose sight of that discourse. Taking at-risk students under their wing and linking the learning to the real world. If the real world is Māori, if it is Te Ao Māori, then it's incumbent on teachers to know something about Te Ao Māori. Not everything, because not very many people know it all, but at least have a working knowledge of it. We understand that culturally responsive pedagogy sometimes requires non-negotiable boundaries, and the research is telling us that Māori students prefer to know the boundaries. Tell me what to do, sir. Explain it to me, miss, and then I'll have a better idea. Don't tell me after I get into trouble. Use moderate language wisely, and keep the emotions moderate. Give the learners clear explanations, and sometimes make tough responses. Don't mess about with them, and they appreciate it more. Also, to understate kindness by the notion of hard care, and to be warm demanders. So I'm getting on now to frameworks and models. And there's a selection, and many people in this theatre would be familiar with the educultural wheel. At least you better be. Are you still buying my stuff? Yeah. educultural wheel's been around for a while. I'm just going to touch on it. Te Pikinga ki runga, the excellent work that Sonia's been developing. The Hikairo schema, reading development, ka awatea, looking for what it is about successful Māori students. What were the realities for them? Why were they successful? Why were they achieving when others weren't? And that was a 2-year study that was funded by Ngā Pai o Te Maramatanga, the Māori Core or Centre of Research Excellence. Totally enjoyed that, and it gave us so much to offer, and so much to offer others. Huakina mai, opening doorways for Māori learners in braided rivers, he awa whiria. And it is to 3 of these that we now turn. And the educultural wheel, a coexistence of Māori concepts that vary together in patterned ways. I've adapted this from the marvellous work of Barbara Rogoff, who incidentally, Jill, was the other keynote speaker at the 2001 NZARE conference. So not only did I start to get to know of Graham's work, but I started to develop a friendship with Barbara Rogoff. So what she's saying there is that if, for instance, we had whanaungatanga, rangatiratanga, kotahitanga and manakitanga and pūmanawatanga, they shouldn't be looked at in isolation. However, we can bring them together in patterned ways by giving a repertoire of strategies beneath each of those. So there's pūmanawatanga in the centre, and my daughter Roimata McFarlane is here. She's the, it's got a flash name actually for the Tau Whakarewa, for the Northland Kindergarten Association, and she's developed a program called Pūmanawatanga. I've never ever got any royalties for that. And this is actually chapter 8 from that book that you can, the reference at the bottom of that diagram, Kia Hiwara, Listen to Culture, Māori Students Plea to Educators. And each one of those bullet points in there is, in actual fact, a strategy. And teachers really like these. Show me the way. Show me how. Okay, it's not a prescription, but it gives them some indicators in no uncertain terms. This is the Hikairo schema, which started in 1997. It comes out of the knowledge base of Ngāti Rangi Wewehi, and Trevor Maxwell is one of the leaders of Ngāti Rangi Wewehi. He's here today, come all the way from the Rotorua. And Hikairo was a chief from Ngāti Rangi Wewehi, and way back in 1822, he was like the skilled teacher. He was like the artiste, because the Ngāpuhi tribe, the Taitokero iwi, a tribe, they came down and they were giving Te Arawa an old-fashioned hiding. And it needed a skilled interventionist, a skilled teacher to come in. And it was Hikairo's approach, moderate, using moderate language wisely, knowing when to get in, how get them in, get on with it, get on with them, move them on, just skills of good teaching practice. So he did that really, really well, and it's well documented in Stafford. So we called it the Hikairo schema, and way back in 1997 I got the green light, a memo written, signed by the leader of the tribe then. We've since lost him, Hami Hahunga, to say, yes, if this is going to make a difference for education, go ahead and publish. So we started way back then, and it was only a month ago that I went back to Ngāti Rangi Wewehi and said, we're at it again. We want to publish more. Here are the books. Here are some of them. So I took 20 back. They wanted another 20. They were getting them for free too. But fair enough. But you can see Huataki and Ihi. So each of those letters starts Hikairo in the centre, Hikairo, and they all mean something, and they all are very, very useful in terms of how to strategize and to include. Now, this is not a huge textbook, Some of the other ones are. This is not a 240-pager. It's about 32 pages in A4 size with some things to show teachers how. Also, a braided rivers approach, embodiment of 2 streams of knowledge. And many entities in research across the country are using this approach and modifying it for their own terms these days. So it's appropriate that we have it here in Te Waipounamu. So ka heketia, Accelerating Success, Ministry of Education 2013 and 2017, that's on one side of the braided rivers. Culturally relevant pedagogy, Te Hurunui Clark, did you ever think that your name would be alongside Gloria Ladson-Billings? Because it is. Just getting a wee bit back on the guy, okay? And then some of Morales' work, and then socio-cultural nested systems, McFarlane and Gillen. So all of those researchers on that side, in that stream, are Indigenous people. But here we have the work of Sir Giovanni and William Glasser, Amy's and Tom Kavanagh, Iseldike and Christensen, from other parts of the world, who are writing great stuff. So if we braid the rivers, if we take the best from both streams, then the claim is that it's possible, if not highly likely, that we're going to get something that's even better than if we were to just use one stream on its own. So I now go to another braided rivers. I'm getting towards the end, and I had better as well. And this is a braided rivers approach to the integration of knowledge to facilitate children's early reading success. I want to acknowledge the work of Gail Gillen and her decades of work in phonological awareness. And we sat down and we started to talk about a braided rivers approach. And a paper was written, and it's referenced at the bottom there in very, very small print. And it was led by Gail, absolutely led by Gail. I was a helping hand. And at the bottom of the figure, you can see successful reading experiences. So I want you to imagine if there were no cultural stream for this particular cohort. So we sat down and we said, we thought there's got to be a way that we can braid the rivers for this phonological awareness experience for these learners. Now, this is very small print. Worry not. Examples of activities, it says table 1, to facilitate. So it's good, isn't it? Examples of activities. This is what teachers want, to facilitate early reading success within a braided rivers approach. Integrating influences on reading with indicators of academic success for Indigenous populations. This is a classic example of using the braided rivers in a very clever way. So that it's headed influences on reading development. And then the indicators are down below. Strong cultural identity, resilient, healthy being, a strong sense of place, and family engaged child's learning. Now, right through those streams, ecological, cognitive, and psychological, there are cultural contexts in no uncertain terms. So I'm only going to refer to one of them, and that's the ecological. Okay, so the indicators for success for Indigenous learners, ecological influences, and then there's the strong cultural identity. Encourage family or caregivers to share culturally relevant stories, not just any old story. You know, make it relevant to the learner's world, both oral and written stories. This is an oral tradition, te reo Māori, it's te ao Māori, with their child. Learn about the cultural values, it says there, the myths or legends and cultural stories and what they reflect. Resilient, healthy well-being. Now, Gail and I got these 4 constructs from the Ka Awatea study, the 2-year study that we carried out on successful Māori learners. So we drew from those, and that's allowed, and that should be encouraged. Next one, resilient, healthy learners. Liaise with the community leaders and health professionals. Next, font in red, a strong sense of place. That's called mana ukai pō in the original study. Understand the child's cultural customs and practices, and acknowledges when liaising with families. This is in terms of phonological awareness. Family are engaged in child's learning. Really, was it that important in the general scheme of things for phonological awareness? I think it's probably pretty good, but this one comes down to the core. Family are engaged. Take time to become involved in the community to build positive, trusting relationships. Listen and value the family's perceptions. So I'm not saying that other approaches don't do that, because they do, but this one declares it. It goes that extra mile. So there are some other things. Can you get those down in the next minute? So there's the Kāwatea study in the top right, a model of Māori success. The mana motuhake, mana tū, mana ukai pō, and mana tangatarua. All of these are well documented and accessible and available. The Magic of Mary Morgan, Bev Anadu, and David Riley. Studies that the Mary Morgan, southeastern United States. Bev Anadu, Te Arawa. David Riley, Pākehā teacher in South Auckland, superb. You don't have to be of the same culture in order to be a culturally responsive teaching, but you have to be able to connect to the culture. The bottom centre and bottom right, that's part of Te Pikinga Ki Runga, Sonia, and Huakina Mai. We're developing Huakina Mai. We've published the early childhood one. We're doing the primary one, which will be ready in a couple of months, on to the secondary, and then to the tertiary, Yahoo tertiary people. So it's time to listen to culture as I get to the end of this talk. It has always been time to listen to culture. And I'd say way back in 2003, that commitment to a culturally responsive teaching approach for Māori learners in whānau presupposes a willingness to understand and experience something of te ao Māori. So get out there and have that experienced. If you go to the ASKed acronym about awareness, is A for in the ASKed, S for skill, D for desire, K, sorry, for knowledge, can't spell, and E is for encounter, and D is for desire. And these researchers, Campina and Bakoti in 2010, went to hundreds of places to find out which was the most powerful of those, the awareness or skill or knowledge or encounter or desire. And from their study, they came up with encounter. So have that encounter with culture and listen to culture. So kia whakatōmuri te haere whakamua. I walk backwards into the future. My ancestors, like He Kairo, are ever present. Looking back at 50 years of Māori education. So NZJES asked me to write a paper because it was their 50th birthday in 2015. So I had to summon up the courage to pick 5 programs over 50 years that I thought would have made a difference. And I mean summon up the courage because I thought, holy moly, I'm going to get into trouble if I miss someone out. So the 5 there, and many of these, will, if not all of them, will be familiar to the educators in this room. Ako, te whare tapawhā, these are in chronological order. Te whāreki, decolonising methodologies, and te kotahitanga. So I'm getting to the educational imaginaries. What we have to continue to do is challenge the status quo. Just like Paulo Freire, Gramsci, Gloria Ladson-Billings, and people like Graham and Linda Smith. Critique the knowledge we take for granted. Acknowledge epistemologies of local research and global. Braid the rivers. Look for different angles, because one angle doesn't cut it anymore. Look for how our children your children and their children can grow up in the best possible way. E te rangatira, Graham Nuttall, hei ahara, tūtonu te mana o mahi. So Graham, no matter what, the authority, the mana of your work will continue. Graham, Adrian and Sonia, only when teachers understand the principles by which their actions shape the learning process will they be able to ensure effective learning. Sonia added to that, and she's a good friend of Adrian Elton Lee. So we're trying to braid the rivers again. When teachers understand and draw from values from Te Ao Māori, Sonia would claim, they not only draw from these values, something happens when they see relevance, the learners see relevance. And these teachers appear to have more success in drawing Māori learners into the context. Now, is this guy fast? Yes. Are they going to catch him? No. Is he going to score a try? Yes. How do I know that? That's my mokopuna. We all want them to grow up like that. It's not usually the case, but Tane Randall, captain of the All Blacks, Jill, it says, e te rangatira, Graham. Graham, O Chief in Education. Hei ahara, no matter what, tū tonu te mana o mahi. The mana of your work will always be with us. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora. It is now my honor to introduce our discussant, Professor Letitia Hochstrasser-Fickle is currently the acting Pro-Vice Chancellor for the College of Education, Health and Human Development. She's previously served as the head of School of Māori Social and Cultural Studies and Education and for the School of Teacher Education at the University of Canterbury. She's an experienced academic, researcher, and program evaluator in the area of teacher development and professional learning, with a particular focus on culturally responsive and sustaining practices that enhance student learning. She's worked closely with Professor McFarland over the last several years, both as co-author and co-researcher. Please welcome Professor Fickle.
Ena manahiri turangi, tēnā koto katoa. E te rangatira Angus, tēnā koe, mō ngā kupu me ngā whakaro. Nō reira, tēnā rawa atu ki a koe. Well, Angus, thank you. Thank you for sharing the gift of your words and your insights with us tonight. You've provided nourishment for our minds and our hearts. And in the keeping of Māori and academic tikanga, I'm honored to be able to provide this response to your powerful kōrero. I'd like to do that by beginning with a whakatoki. Mā te rongo ka mohio, from listening comes knowledge. Mā te mohio ka marama, from knowledge comes understanding. Mā te marama ka matua, from understanding comes wisdom. Mā te matua ka ora, from wisdom comes well-being. And what you've provided for us tonight, Angus, in listening to your kōrero, we've gained the knowledge of understanding the dangers of a Eurocentric hegemony that can perpetuate the colonial perspectives and theories of learners and learning that delegitimize Indigenous, and in this case, Māori knowledge, and their ways of learning that only serve to perpetuate inequality. And you have highlighted for us the recent scholarship the recent research that shows the way that these unfortunate legacy of colonization and hegemonic beliefs have continued to perpetuate teacher beliefs in thinking and actions that have not well served Māori nor Pacific learners. But you've also reminded us not to get caught in the pessimism and to see the glass not as half empty, but as half full. And in your estimable words, to reframe the problems that we confront in this space and to see them as opportunities for our own growth. And you've done that by helping us to understand that there's a space for braided rivers, for bringing the Western ideas about teaching and learning and the hidden lives of our learners to the work from that Western frame, but also to understand that even as we do that, in braiding the rivers, that there is a clear and special place for Māori and Indigenous knowledge, for Mātauranga Māori, that needs to be upheld in its own integrity. And that the epistemological frameworks that sit behind that, the ways of understanding the world and knowing, need to be honored and respected and not watered down in that braided rivers. He awhina whiria. And I can speak to this from a personal lens, Angus, because what your models and the research and working with you has provided for us for me in this space of listening to that knowledge and then coming to understand was the ability to integrate these concepts and ideas into our Masters of Teaching and Learning so that we were preparing the new generation of teachers in that space to understand what the educultural wheel is, and to be able to use it, to have that repertoire of practice, and to understand life from a Māori worldview, and to have the encounters, and to engage in that space, and not to be afraid, but to fill their keti with the repertoires and ways of experiencing life that come from Te Ao Māori. And so for that, I'd like to thank you. That has been a personal journey that I can speak to about when listening to culture comes knowledge, and from that, an understanding of how to put it into practice. But you've also tonight, through your lecture, engaged us in understanding the intellectual whakapapa of cultural responsive practice that was born in that restlessness of the global educationalists and Māori who chafed at the oppressive frameworks of schooling and sought a pathway that was more holistic and attuned to the empowerment and liberatory possibilities of education, that half-full glass. It's important to have this knowledge of the whakapapa of these concepts, that intellectual genealogy, if you will, that helps us as educators to understand our place in the world as teachers and as leaders, to illuminate for us the proper order of relationships, because that's what whakapapa is, between people, between our students and ourselves and their whānau, about the places, our centers, our schools, our communities, and the things, in this case, the ideas and the knowledge, the concepts and the worldviews. As you said, Māori speak of walking backwards into the future, and that captures the understanding of how past informs our approach to the present and guides our aspirations for the future. So in tracing this intellectual whakapapa, you've offered us a shared space to examine the journey of culturally responsive practice from its emergence to our current understandings and considerations, so as to challenge us to consider what next and where to from here. What is our future, and how can we draw on these transcendent thinkers, including, of course, yourself and Sonia and Gail, to craft a more responsive, enlivening, and enriched practice where culture counts? You've shown us the wisdom of culturally responsive practice and invited us as educationalists to make this the place we stand, our tūranga waiwai, in solidarity and with a sense of belonging to the joint struggle for educational equality for rangataha Māori and for all of the young people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. In providing us with this place to ground ourselves, you've also laid down a wero, a challenge for us to pick up. That wero is to embrace this wisdom of practice you've illuminated tonight and confidently step forward into the future by transforming these frameworks and models of culturally responsive teaching into a repertoire of real acts of knowing, doing, and being. So thank you, Angus. It is truly the case that the food of the leader is the knowledge and communication. So Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Amarangi McFarlane, as the first Māori presenter of the Graham Nuttall Lecture, you again make a first. You again speak that truth to the power. And I appreciate your scholarship, and I know the people here joining us tonight have appreciated your scholarly leadership over these many years. It is a taonga, and we thank you for sharing your gifts of knowledge and wisdom through your lecture tonight.